Welcome to Dreamline Stories, a world where silence is louder than music, and a gilded cage can sometimes be the only sanctuary left. Brace yourself for Shadows of the Alabaster Cage, the Eternal Symphony. This is a story of obsession turning into healing, and the discovery that sometimes, the most beautiful melodies are composed from the wreckage of our greatest tragedies. Sit back, listen closely, and let the symphony begin. Chapter 1: The Weight of Velvet. The first thing I realized was that the silence was too heavy. It wasn't the silence of my old apartment, which tasted like dust and felt like the cold draft beneath a door. This silence was thick. It smelled of expensive sandalwood and the faint, sharp tang of old parchment. I kept my eyes closed for what felt like hours, trying to map the world without sight. My body felt weighted, anchored into a mattress that was far too soft to be real. And my hands felt heavy. I tried to twitch my fingers, to feel the familiar calluses of a violinist, but I met a soft, firm resistance. Silk. My hands were wrapped in silk bandages, held at a specific angle that felt clinical, almost reverent. When I finally opened my eyes, the light was the first thing that hurt. It was golden, pouring through massive floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over a horizon of churning, gray ocean. I wasn't in a hospital. I was in a palace of blood-red velvet and dark mahogany. I stared at my hands for a long time. They looked like cocoons. I tried to sit up, and that's when I saw him. He was a shadow standing by the fireplace, his silhouette sharp against the flickering orange flames. Julian Vane. I knew that face. I had seen him in the front row of the Royal Albert Hall. I had seen him in the shadows of the stage door in Paris. He didn't move. He didn't even seem to breathe. "You're awake," he said. His voice was a low vibration that seemed to travel through the floorboards and up into my spine. "Don't try to move the bandages, Elias. The skin is still knitting. The world tried to tear you apart, but I brought you somewhere where you can finally be still." Chapter 2: The First Meal. The clock on the mantel ticked with a rhythmic, agonizing precision. Julian sat across from me at a small, circular table. On it was a silver tray with soup that smelled of herbs I couldn't name. He didn't speak. He simply watched. I tried to pick up the spoon with my left hand, the one that was less damaged but still trembling. The silver felt cold. My coordination was gone. I dropped the spoon, and the clatter against the porcelain sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. I expected him to mock me. I expected the pity that the doctors always gave me, that tilted head and the soft tsk of sympathy. Instead, Julian just leaned forward. He didn't reach for the spoon. He looked into my eyes with a gaze that was terrifyingly intense. "Take your time," he whispered. "We have all the time in the world, Elias. The sun will rise and set 1,000 times, and I will still be sitting right here, waiting for you to find your strength again." Chapter 3: The Ghost in the Corner. By the third day, the walls began to speak to me. I was allowed to walk, but only within the confines of the master suite. In the corner, sitting on a velvet-lined pedestal, was a violin. Not just any violin. I recognized the grain of the wood, the specific curve of the scroll. It was a 1715 Stradivarius. I stood before it, my bandaged hands hanging uselessly at my sides. It was a ghost. A beautiful, wooden ghost of the man I used to be. I wanted to smash it. I wanted to scream at Julian for putting it there, for dangling my greatest love and my greatest agony right in front of my face. When Julian entered the room later that evening, I was shaking. "Why?" I choked out. "Why do you have that here?" "I can't play it. I'll never play it again." Julian walked toward me, stopping just inches away. He smelled like winter air and expensive tobacco. He reached out, his hand hovering near my cheek but never touching. "Because even if it never makes a sound again," he said softly, "it is still the most beautiful thing in this house. Just like you." Chapter 4: The Caretaker's Touch. The massages began on the 5th night. Julian brought a bowl of warm, amber-colored oil. He sat on the edge of my bed and, for the first time, he unwrapped the silk. I looked away. I didn't want to see the jagged purple scars, the way my knuckles were crooked and wrong. But Julian didn't flinch. He poured the oil into his palms, rubbing them together until they were warm, and then he took my right hand in his. His touch was terrifying. It was firm but incredibly gentle. He moved his thumbs in slow, deliberate circles over the scarred tissue. I gasped, the pain and the strange, electric sensation of his skin against mine sending a jolt through my system. "Breathe," he commanded gently. "Don't fight it, Elias. Let the tension go. I am going to heal what they broke. I am going to make you whole, even if it takes a lifetime of nights like this." Chapter 5: The Library of Secrets. The library was a cathedral of paper and leather. Thousands of books lined the walls, reaching up into the shadows of the ceiling. Julian allowed me to spend my afternoons there. He would sit in a high-backed leather chair, reading aloud to me in that voice that felt like a dark lullaby. He read poetry about ancient ruins and fallen kings. One afternoon, I asked him about his family. The air in the room seemed to turn cold instantly. "My father didn't believe in people," Julian said, his eyes fixed on a page he wasn't reading. "He believed in assets. He viewed my mother as a trophy, and he viewed me as an investment. When I was 10, he sold my favorite horse because it had gone lame. He told me that anything that cannot perform its function is a waste of space." Julian looked up at me, his eyes dark and burning. "That is why I hate the world out there, Elias. They are like my father. They loved you when you were performing. They threw you away when you were lame. But I am not my father. I collect the things the world is too stupid to keep." Chapter 6: The Unspoken Rhythm. As the weeks turned into months, the house began to feel less like a prison and more like a shared dream. Julian became the sun my world orbited around. I learned his rhythms, the quiet scratch of his pen in the early hours, the way he took his coffee black and scalding, and the specific, heavy silence that followed him when he had been on a business call with the outside. One evening, I found myself standing in the kitchen. I wanted to do something, anything, to prove I wasn't just a bird in a cage. I tried to chop a single apple. My right hand seized, the nerves firing like tiny lightning bolts of pain. I dropped the knife. Julian was there before it even hit the floor. He didn't scold me. He didn't tell me to go back to bed. He simply picked up the knife, finished the cut, and handed me a slice. "You don't have to be useful to be wanted, Elias," he whispered, his eyes searching mine. "In this house, you only have to exist." Chapter 7: The Great Escape. The night I left was the coldest of the year. I don't know why I did it. Perhaps the silence had become too loud. I waited until Julian was in his study, then I slipped out through the service entrance. The wind off the Atlantic was like a whip. I climbed down the jagged path, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I walked for hours until I reached the village. I saw a neon sign for a diner, the first bright, artificial light I'd seen in a lifetime. I walked in, shivering. A waitress looked at me, then at my hands. I saw it instantly, the pity. That look that said I was a tragedy. A man at the counter recognized me. "Hey, you're Thorne, right? The one who crashed? Shame about those hands. You were good." I walked back out into the rain. The world Julian had described was real. It was a place of shallow memories and cold judgments. I sat on a bench and wept, realizing that the only place I felt like a human being was back on that cliff, inside the cage I had tried so hard to flee. Chapter 8: The Fever. Julian found me. He didn't use guards or dogs. He just pulled up in his car, stepped out into the mud, and opened the door. He didn't say a word until we were back inside the warmth of the estate. "You're freezing," he said, his voice trembling with a rare, raw emotion. That night, the fever took me. I spent 3 days lost in a world of fire and shadows. I dreamt of broken violins and Julian's eyes. Every time I woke, screaming from a nightmare, he was there. He held me through the shakes. He whispered into my ear, "I'm here. I've got you. I won't let the world take you again." In my delirium, I realized I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I was afraid of the world without him. Chapter 9: The Siege. The quiet was shattered by the sound of breaking glass and shouting. Men I didn't know, men with cold eyes and heavy boots, broke into the sanctuary. They wanted Julian's money, his secrets, his life. I hid in the shadows of the library, my heart hammering against my ribs. I saw a man leveling a gun at Julian's back. I didn't think. I didn't consider my hands or my future. I grabbed the heavy bronze clock from the mantel, the one that had ticked away our months together, and I swung. The world went white. When it cleared, Julian was standing over the intruder, and I was on my knees, my hands throbbing with a pain so intense it felt like fire. Julian looked at me, and for the first time, the Ice King looked utterly broken. "You saved me," he whispered, kneeling beside me. "Why did you save me?" "Because," I gasped, the words finally coming free, "you're the only music I have left." Wait, if you've made it this far, we're basically best friends now. Hit subscribe and join the crew. Alright, let's get to the ending you've been waiting for. Chapter 10: The Choice. The morning after the attack, Julian didn't come to my room with oil. He came with a folder. "These are legal documents," he said, his voice flat and tired. "A trust fund. An apartment in the city. A driver. You are free, Elias. Truly free. I was wrong to keep you. I see now that my love was just another way to break you." He turned to leave, but I reached out. I grabbed the sleeve of his coat. My fingers hurt, but I didn't let go. "I don't want the apartment," I said, my voice steady for the first time since the accident. "And I don't want to be free in a world that only sees what I can't do. I want to be here. With you. But not as a prisoner. As a partner." Julian turned back, his eyes searching mine for a lie he wouldn't find. He reached out and, for the first time, he didn't just touch my hands. He cupped my face. Chapter 11: Home. We left the cliffside. The estate was too full of ghosts, too full of the memories of my captivity and his obsession. We found a house by a lake, a place of soft grass and sunlight that didn't feel like a spotlight. Julian learned to garden. He found peace in things that grew slowly, things that didn't need to be perfect to be beautiful. And I started to teach. I didn't play for crowds anymore. I played for the children in the village, showing them that even a broken hand can find a melody. On our first anniversary at the lake house, Julian gave me a new violin. It wasn't a Stradivarius. It was simple, handmade, and rugged. I tucked it under my chin. My hands were stiff, and the notes weren't perfect. They were shaky, a little sharp, a little flat. But as I looked at Julian, sitting on the porch with a smile that reached his eyes, I realized the music was finally right. We weren't a collector and his prize anymore. We were just two souls, finally free, finally whole, and finally, beautifully home. Love the story? Hit subscribe and ring the bell to join the community and get notified the second a new video drops.